Robert, a 9-year-old boy, and his best friend Mike were living a difficult life. One day, they weren't invited to a classmate's beach house. The reason? They were poor. This moment of exclusion sparked something in Robert, a flame that drove him to seek answers. He came home and asked his father what he could do to become rich. The answer was vague. You have to learn how to make more money. Even though he was only a boy, Robert realized that this answer wouldn't solve the problem. His father, a respected teacher, was a figure he called Poor Dad. Although he was educated and earned well, he always faced financial difficulties. Seeing how Robert and his friend Mike were determined to learn more about making money, Robert's father, the Poor Dad, advised them to go and talk to Mike's father, whom Robert calls the Rich Dad. Both Robert and Mike were surprised by this advice because Rich Dad wasn't rich yet at that time, and he never finished 8th grade but had been in charge of several successful businesses. Nevertheless, Robert and Mike went to meet Mike's father, and on the day of the meeting, he asked them if they were ready to learn how to make money. They were enthusiastic and nodded yes. He said he would teach them how to make money, but not like in a classroom. He would only teach them if they agreed to work for him. According to him, they would be wasting their time if they just wanted to sit and listen, like they did in school. They could learn faster by working with him. Robert wanted to ask a question but didn't have the chance. Mike's father said that if they didn't make a decision soon, they would never learn how to make money. Opportunities come and go, and knowing when to make quick decisions is an important skill. They knew they had to decide. Robert and Mike looked at each other and both agreed to accept the offer. Mike's father was pleased and said he would pay them 10 cents an hour and they would work 3 hours every Saturday. Although Robert had a softball game that day, he chose to work instead of going to the game. He knew this was his opportunity and didn't want to miss it, so Robert and Mike started working for Mrs. Martin, who was Mike's father's employee and ran a small supermarket. It was the kind of market where people bought essential products like milk, bread, butter, and cigarettes. The only problem was that the shops didn't have air conditioning, so they had to keep the doors open to the street and car park, which meant that dust entered the shop every time a car drove past. Their job was to take the tinned products off the shelves, dust them off, and then carefully stack them back up. It was boring work. They worked for 3 hours every Saturday and were paid 30 cents. Which wasn't very exciting since a comic book cost 10 cents back then, but they only took it on because they wanted to learn how to make money. But after 3 weeks, Robert was ready to give up. He felt like a slave working for just 10 cents an hour, and he hadn't seen Mike's father since the first meeting. So at lunchtime on the 4th week, he told Mike he was resigning. School was boring enough. He didn't want to waste his Saturday doing that job anymore. It was decided. To his surprise, Mike smiled and said that his father had been expecting this to happen. He had told Mike to meet him when Robert was ready to quit, which confused Robert, but Mike said that his father taught things in a different way to Robert's parents. He didn't like giving lectures and used experience as a way of teaching. Robert agreed to meet Mike's father the following Saturday to hear what he had to say. Even Robert's real father was angry with Mike's father. Poor Dad advised him to demand a raise of at least 25 cents an hour, and if he didn't get it, he should resign. When Robert arrived at Mike's house, he still had to wait for an hour before Rich Dad finally turned up. Frustrated and angry, Robert told Mike's father that he hadn't kept his end of the bargain. He had promised to teach him if he worked for him, but he hadn't kept his promise. Robert accused him of being greedy and not respecting his employees. Mike's father then asked Robert if teaching meant talking or giving a lecture, and Robert nodded yes. The Rich Dad told him that life is the best teacher of all and that most of the time life doesn't talk or lecture. He explained that life often pushes us to one side or the other to teach us something. Some people let life push them while others fight against the wrong things, whether it's their job, boss, or spouse, but few people accept life's push as an opportunity to learn and grow. Rich Dad said that he had over 150 employees, but none of them ever asked him to teach them about money. They just looked for jobs and paychecks, but never really understood the purpose of their work. However, when Mike told them that they wanted to learn how to earn money, Mike decided to create a program that reflected their real-life experiences. He paid them just 10 cents an hour, which initially made them angry, but he explained that he wanted them to experience the push and pull of life so that they could understand what he was trying to teach them. When Rich Dad asked Robert what he had learned from working for such a low wage, he complained about his greed and lack of respect for his workers. He even threatened to resign if Rich Dad didn't pay him more or teach him more. Rich Dad explained that most people would do exactly what he suggested: resign and look for a better paying job. But this usually wouldn't solve their problems. He wanted Robert to understand that waiting for a raise, thinking that more money would solve their problems, wasn't the solution. The solution is to make money work for you. Robert was slowly beginning to understand the lesson he was trying to teach him. Rich Dad asked if Robert still had a passion for learning. When Robert said yes, he told him he would stop paying him for his work in the shop. Robert was confused. He had come to ask for a raise, but now he was going to work for free? Rich Dad said that if he wanted to make more money, he had to use his head and figure it out. Robert and Mike worked for free for 3 weeks. Then one day Mike's father turned up and took the boys out for an ice cream, and Rich Dad asked them if they had learned anything yet. They replied that they hadn't. Rich Dad told them that they'd better hurry up and start thinking about the lesson that awaited them. To explain the lesson, he asked the boys to look at Mrs. Mars and the people in the park and think about whether the life they're living seems exciting to them. They've worked hard for little money all their lives, clinging to the illusion of job security and looking forward to 3 weeks holiday each year, then a retirement after 45 years of service. Rich Dad told them that if this kind of life excited them, he was willing to offer them a raise to 25 cents an hour. Their heartbeats raced, and they knew it was too much for them. But they still said no. Seeing their resistance, the Rich Dad increased his offer to $1 an hour, then to $2. Every time he increased his offer, Robert's heart started to explode, and his brain pressurized him to accept the offer. He knew that $2 an hour would make him the richest boy in the world. He couldn't imagine earning that much money. He wanted to say yes. He could already imagine a new bike, a new baseball glove, and adoration from his friends when he showed off the money. But somehow his mouth stayed shut. Rich Dad was staring at the two boys who stared back at him, wide-eyed and empty-brained. He was testing them, and he knew that there was a part of their emotions that could accept the deal. He knew that every person has a weak and needy part of their soul that can be bought, and he knew that every individual also had a part of their soul that was resilient and could never be bought. It was just a question of which part was stronger. Then he made a final offer of $5 an hour. Suddenly, the boys' expressions changed. Their blank stares turned to calm. It was as if the temptation disappeared at that moment. They felt that the part of their soul that was weak and needy was silenced, and it was the part that was priceless that took over. Rich Dad said it was good that they were priceless. Most people are priceless because their lives are controlled by fear and greed. The fear of running out of money makes them work hard for a wage. But as soon as they have the money, greed makes them think of all the things they could buy, which makes them need more money, which makes them spend more and work harder. What Rich Dad called the rat race. Mike asked if there was another way, and Rich Dad said yes, but few people know about it. Mike wanted to know what it was, and Rich Dad said they would learn by working with him for free. Mike asked for a clue, and Rich Dad said that the first step is to tell the truth. When asked which truth, he replied that it was about how they felt and they should confess it to themselves, not to others. Rich Dad expressed doubts that the people who work for him are able to confess their truth. Instead, they feel afraid of not having money and respond emotionally rather than logically. They don't confront their fears, and their emotions end up controlling their brains. They work to earn money, hoping that this will alleviate their fear, but it never does. Money rules his emotions and soul, but he refuses to recognize this truth. Rich Dad encouraged him to avoid the trap by saying that being rich doesn't solve the problem, and when asked why, he introduced the other key emotion, desire. It's common for people to desire better, prettier, or more exciting things. They often work for money because they think it will make them happy, but the happiness of money is short-lived. Many rich people are actually driven by fear, thinking that money will make them feel insecure. Yet they end up afraid of losing everything, which makes them even more anxious than when they were poor. Emotions often control our thoughts, and fear can lead us to make decisions that don't solve the real problem. For example, when someone is afraid of not having enough money, they may think that getting a job is the only solution. But in reality, a job is just a temporary solution to a long-term problem. It's important to learn to think for ourselves and not let our emotions control us. Rich Dad said he saw hope when the two boys agreed to work for free, and also took the first step when they resisted their emotions and the temptation to earn a higher hourly wage. They were learning to think despite being emotionally charged. So he told them to keep working, and the sooner they forgot about needing a check, the easier their adult lives would be. He encouraged them to keep using their brains by working for free, and soon they would only be shown ways of earning money far beyond what they could ever afford. They would be able to see things that others couldn't. The moment they saw an opportunity, they would have it for the rest of their lives. The boys followed Rich Dad's advice and soon saw an opportunity to create a library where children could pay an admission fee and read as many comics as they wanted. They hired Mike's younger sister to be head librarian. She charged each child cents for entry to the library. It was a bargain for the children, as a comic book cost 10 cents each, and they could read 5 or 6 in 2 hours. Mike and Robert earned an average of $9 a week. Over a period of 3 months, they paid their sister $1 a week and allowed her to read the comics for free. They had to close the library after 3 months because of a fight that took place there. But they had already learned how to make money work for them. Even when they weren't physically present, they had learned the first lesson. Rich people don't work for money. They were ready to learn more, and Mike's father was ready to teach them a lesson too. Why teach financial literacy? When people ask Robert where to start getting rich, he gives the same answer his rich dad gave him. If you want to be rich, you need to be financially literate. For example, accounting is a boring and confusing subject, but absolutely crucial to financial success. To make it easier, his rich dad used pictures and simple language to teach it. And this proves once again that when it comes to financial education, our educational system is clearly flawed. Have you ever heard of anyone being taught how to deal with pocket money at school, or how to save their lunch money in order to become rich? Of course not. Our school systems are programmed to teach every conceivable subject except finance. That's why the first thing to know is the difference between assets and liabilities, and that's what Rich Dad explained to Robert Mike. He said that if you want to be rich, the only thing you need to do is buy assets, and that's all you need to know to get rich. But even though it's so simple, it's something that many people don't understand. When Rich Dad first explained it to Robert and Mike, they thought he was joking, because the concept was so simple. How can adults not understand this? Shouldn't everyone be rich? The problem is that most people have been educated differently by bankers, planners, financiers, and others. So they need to unlearn what they think they know, which is why they buy liabilities thinking they're assets. Robert uses simple definitions for assets and liabilities. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. It sounds simple, but most people confuse this concept. Most people think that buying a house to live in is one of the biggest assets they can acquire. But if you pay property tax, VAT, insurance, and maintenance costs every month to maintain that asset, it just takes money out of your pocket, so it's a liability. Real assets are shares, bonds, investment funds, property that generates income, a business, and many others. But more important than understanding the difference between the two columns of assets and liabilities is knowing how a rich person operates in these two columns. When a rich person receives an income, the first thing he does is invest in assets. The assets generate more income for him. With more income, he invests even more in assets, and so a virtuous cycle is formed. The rest of people, on the other hand, when they receive a raise, the first thing they do is buy more liabilities. A plasma TV, an iPhone 15 Pro Max, a new car. They may have a good salary and appear wealthy, but at the end of the day, they are trapped in a flow of debt and a single source of income. If they lose their job tomorrow, they're lost. Pay attention to this. The rich buy luxury goods last, the poor buy luxury goods first. So always pay yourself first and only then spend. In this cycle of paying yourself and acquiring assets as the first priority, you will generate great wealth in the long term or even in the short term if you find good opportunities. Every dollar you put in the assets column is a dollar that works for you. So, Robert's first lesson is to learn the real difference between assets and liabilities and make money work for you. The author teaches us that we all have a series of internal resources that can turn us into successful entrepreneurs, and that this is often not due to a lack of self-confidence. Characteristics such as boldness, courage, audacity, cleverness, and persistence, among others, are not efficiently developed by the educational system we have. And this jeopardizes our ability to assess and take risks, managing them in every opportunity that comes our way. Finally, the author proposes 10 foolproof steps to follow on the road to financial success. Hi, this is another video from the channel Be a Better Person. If you really like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to receive more inspiring videos every week. Thanks again for watching, and see you soon, Hugs.